guys all for being here. My name is Laurie Hall, and I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture with CHW in Gainesville, Florida. And I'm a 2009 BLA graduate from the University of Florida. We're really excited to do this, to have this, and we appreciate everybody taking this time to join us. Before we get started, I just want everybody to know that, obviously none of us have all of the answers. This is such an unprecedented time, and it's impacted each one of us differently. But in all of this, we realize that students are very uniquely impacted and that they face a lot of challenges, and we recognize that. And our hope is that, this is a time, and through the panel sharing their stories of graduating and starting their careers during a difficult time, that hopefully this can provide some encouragement and some insight to the students. And so we again, really, really appreciate you guys being here. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Adam Mcallister, who's going to co-moderate today with me to introduce himself and then also kind of go over how we're going to format the meeting.
Thanks, Laurie. As you mentioned, my name is Adam Mcallister. I'm an associate with Dix Height Plus Partners down in Orlando, Florida. I also currently serve as the president of the ASLA Florida chapter. So a huge thanks to Laurie for brainstorming this and getting us here. So, and then thank you, as she said, to all of you for being here with us today. I am a 2014 BLA grad from University of Florida. I see a lot of other familiar names and faces on this list, so that's exciting, but a lot of unfamiliar faces, which is even more exciting. Some house rules. Looks like everybody's pretty muted right now. If you could just keep yourself muted, that would be very helpful. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, so I ask you to do that through the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat throughout the discussion. Any follow-up questions, anything that you want to ask, please direct them to the chat, and I will make sure that we address as many as we can. If there's anything left over at the end, we'll follow up with all the participants. Also, if you're not a speaker, we just request that you turn your webcam off at this time, just because it helps to keep all of our speakers at the top of the list so you can see who our panelists are. At the end of the meeting, we're going to ask everybody to turn them on, and we're going to do some screenshots and post them as a follow-up to this too. So that'll be fun to see everybody's faces. Lastly, I need to announce that we are recording this. So after the meeting is over, National ASLA will be posting it to their COVID-19 resources page, and so you'll be able to access this after the fact. With that, I will pass it off to our first panelist on the list, and then we'll go down the list from there. Cody, take it away.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for having us here. Really appreciative of it. My name is Cody Smith. I am a principal and partner with Dix Height Plus Partners out of Orlando. I graduated in 2008 from Purdue University, having done a year-long internship in 2007, so in Florida. So returned to Florida in 2008, just about in the worst period that you could possibly graduate. So I want to pass it on to Anna.
Hi, thank you, Cody. Thank you everyone for having us. So my name is Anna Menna, and I graduated with my master's in landscape architecture from the University of Florida in 2005. So I entered the workforce right before the recession hit, about a year before. And I am currently a senior landscape architect for Walt Disney Imagineering. And I'll pass it along to Kirsten.
Hello, I'm Kirsten Siegel. I'm Municipal Studio Manager for the Landscape Architecture Division of WGI. I graduated from Florida International University with my master's in landscape architecture in 2009. And I don't have the official list. I'm not sure who I'm passing it off to.
Gavin.
I'm Gavin Kane. I'm a senior associate with Marquis, Latimer, and Hallbeck in St. Augustine, Florida. I graduated from UF in 2009 with Lori. We got our BLAs. I'm not sure who's next.
Casey?
Hi there, I'm Casey Prankin. I'm a landscape architect with Palm Beach County Parks and Recreation Department. I graduated in 2009 from FIU, Florida International University, with a master's. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And next up, we have Shiva.
Hey everyone, I'm Shiva West. I graduated from the University of Florida in 2002. So I had 6 years experience before the recession. I am the community design manager for GAI's Community Solutions Group, which is a studio of landscape architects, urban planners, and economists. And I'm located in Orlando.
And last but certainly not least, Jennifer.
Hi everyone, glad that you could join us today. My name is Jennifer Deolis. I'm with Kimley Horn and a landscape architect there in our St. Petersburg office. I'm also the current Florida ASLA chapter secretary. I graduated from Clemson in 2009 with my BLA, and then from Virginia Tech with my master's in natural resources in 2014, which I did while I was looking for work during that recession period. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm glad you guys are all here.
All right, so I think that's everybody on the panel. So where we wanted to start is to just go through each member of the panel so they could share their story of how they were impacted during the recession. So we're going to start then with Cody, if you'll give us how were you impacted?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I did a year-long internship in Orlando. Coming from Indiana, coming down to Florida is a pretty big stretch. But had a great opportunity during that internship from 2007 to 2008, in which, you know, that was also probably about a year away from the prime kind of point of when the recession began. But was able to get my foot in the door as part of that internship. So when I graduated in 2008, that's one benefit that I had at that point was having some level of understanding from the firm of my talents, my skills, kind of where I stood on things. So having a foot in the door allowed me to return back to Gliding Jackson. I will say that period on for the next two and a half years was one of the biggest kind of growing opportunities that I had as a young professional. That was very eye-opening, and it all started with one day, probably about a month after I started, the friend that I had sitting next to me to the right was called into an office. The friend that I had left me sitting next to me was called into an office, both of which were laid off. And then that day it was probably close to 30 people getting laid off in a single day out of probably 150 person firm. So kind of shook the system quite a bit. And we continued to see layoffs for the next year and a half. I was young and I was pretty nimble with my skill sets at that time. Was always curious of if I was being kept on as cheap labor. That's what my friends that got laid off always told me. So I don't know if that was true or not. I'd like to think maybe it was something else, but I was fortunate enough to be able to stay on with Gliding Jackson. The next big kind of shakeup came when AECOM purchased Gliding Jackson due to economic challenges. Gliding Jackson did look to merge and then end up being purchased with AECOM, which changed things quite a bit, and I can get into that a little bit more. But that's kind of the gist of how I got my foot in the door and what I saw my first year and a half out of school during the recession.
Anna?
Yes, so like I mentioned, when I graduated, I actually was right before the recession, and so the job market was really, really hot and had a lot of opportunities. And I ended up at Wilson Miller down in Fort Myers, and that is the precise point where the housing bubble just burst. So about a year after I was there, I started hearing about rumors about layoffs at my firm, and decided I was gonna look for another job before that layoff hit. So I networked and through friends ended up finding a position at Excite Plus Partners here in Orlando. And so I moved to Orlando and kind of feel like I saved myself a year before a layoff. So as the housing market kind of collapsed and everyone, you know, there started to be a lot of issues and everyone started to get laid off, at least I had a year of working at a really, really awesome design firm, and made fantastic contacts there till this day. And so I was laid off. And then from there, it got more challenging to look for a job. But again, I networked and applied to just about everything I could think of, and ended up in planning of all things. So I ended up having to switch gears and kind of reinvent a little bit. And I ended up working for a small city government in a planning department, and learned a lot. Was not obviously my first choice for my profession, but it actually in the end has paid off in huge rewards. I ended up being able to get my AICP and my landscape architecture license through that role. And understanding a lot about planning and policy planning in city government gave me the tools to get the position I'm in now. So when the economy started to come back and I started to look for jobs again, I was able to apply to more diverse positions, and to the position that I applied for Disney actually was looking for someone that had a planning background as well as landscape architecture. And so I was able to check all those boxes. So although at the time when I was in that recession and doing that job, and it was not my most favorite thing to do, it actually paid off, and I learned a lot, and in the end worked out really well. So.
Thank you. So next is Kirsten.
Hello. So I didn't graduate till 2009, so the recession was pretty well under its way before I graduated. And really, I graduated with Casey, and I was just sort of hoping, hey, it's gonna get better by the time I graduate. I had a little bit more of, I guess, something to work through, because I found out I was pregnant about 3 days after walking to get my diploma. And so, okay, I wasn't expecting that either, but whatever, I got to get a job. And the way that it went, I did a lot of networking. I did apply to everything possible. Unfortunately, it was very obvious that I was pregnant by the time I started having interviews. So everyone was very kind, but wasn't really looking to hire someone that, was going to have their first child. But everyone was very helpful. And basically I did 9 months of that and just stayed, positive, and, followed any leads that I could get, made a lot of contacts. And then luckily, basically just 2 weeks after giving birth, I was offered an internship at Raymond Jungles in Miami. And so I jumped on it, and made the sacrifice to travel down to Miami. I live in Palm Beach County, but at that point, after working for a job for 9 months under, multiple constraints, there was no way I was going to pass that up. And I was lucky for, at the time, the firm really focused on high-end residential, which the recession didn't hurt as much. And really, a lot of the people in the studio at the time were all people who had lost their jobs over the past couple years. And I stayed there for 4 years to get as much experience as I could. And then as, the recession was lifted and people started hiring again, a lot of the contacts that I had made, during those 9 months started contacting me. People started hiring, getting busy again. And I was able to, shift to at least work in my county.
Great.
And
Gavin?
Thanks, Lori. Like I said, I graduated with Lori from UF in 2009. When we were in school, we were very fortunate because the economy was really good. And I had 2 really fantastic internships. But as I was coming to my last semester, it was pretty humbling because a lot of the contacts that I had made were getting laid off at those firms and other firms, obviously. So that was, it was hard. When I was in school, I had the blinders on. I was more focused on doing urban design, larger scale projects. And I was fortunate my final year of school to work on a grant with Tina Guruchari that extended past graduation for a few months. So I was able to stay on that and get paid by the university. And then I was approached by Kevin Thompson. His neighbor wanted to renovate his yard, who's also a professor at UF. And I I didn't know if they just wanted to plant flowers or what they wanted to do, but they're like, just give us your ideas. So 7 weeks later, I had done a full landscape renovation for their property and had students come. Learned a lot. I didn't, knowing what I know now, I don't know if I would have did what I did, but it was fun. After that, I had started my own business, GEC Design Studio, and moved back to Florida with my parents. I worked at a microbrewery and also got a job at Lowe's in their garden center to stay relevant. And about 10 months out of school, I got 2 interview opportunities, one down in Sarasota with Mcallister Incorporated, and one up in New Jersey with a firm called Argos there was a couple guys that broke off from EDAW. I got the job in Sarasota and moved down there. Started with Mcallister Incorporated in June 2010. It's a small residential design build studio, and I honestly never thought I would do residential for a career. It was just kind of like a side, but it was such a blessing. So many blessings came from being there. I went down there as a one-dimensional kind of career-focused person and became a more well-rounded human being while being there. Met my wife. The cool thing about working for a small firm was that it was just me and Mike Gilkey, and I got to focus on everything from concept through construction. And with residential, there was a lot of turnaround. So I got to see a lot of things built, which I never really thought about when I was in school. So I got an opportunity fall 2018 to work with Marquis Latimer and Hallback in St. Augustine. I knew Jeremy and Fremont from school, and Fred Hallback was a professor of mine. He was actually my professional practice professor my final semester at UF. And we do everything from large land planning through residential. So I've come full circle, you could say.
Thank you. Casey.
Hi there. So I graduated in 2009 when private was pretty slow, but public was still not feeling it as much. And I used, before I graduated, the case studies that I did for my thesis to meet as many people as I could. And after doing a case study on a county park, Bill Wilshire hired me part-time as a planner with Palm Beach County Parks and Recreation. And I kind of want to highlight that I think a lot of the time in front of a decision maker can be just as good, or sometimes if not more important, than an interview. In a recession, I had a position before I graduated or even finished a portfolio. For me, this was a second career, and I was also expecting my son at that time. Since I was working part-time, I freelanced for a couple other small firms, and these jobs were pretty easy to get because of my flexibility. So I could go in maybe one day a week at this firm and then do some work at home at night for the other one. It was a lot of late nights on the computer, just juggling the logistics of going to and from all those places and managing the childcare. Those were the hard parts, but I learned a lot from all those different places. I stayed focused on preparing for the LAIR and being qualified for an LA position when it opened up at county. I had my daughter Maven, and 5 years after graduation, I finally passed the LAIR, and that coincided with the LA position opening up at county. And I definitely believe that luck happens when preparation meets opportunity, like a lot of people say. And having the baby, passing LAIR, and becoming a full-fledged landscape architect was one of the best years of my life. And that kind of came out of all of that evolution. My advice is definitely stay active in your community. Volunteer or start a project somewhere. I installed a small butterfly garden at my daughter's preschool, and people really enjoyed that. Even though it was a small thing, it was something that brought me joy, brought them joy, and that could be documented and shared. Teach what you've learned to others, especially with all the social media now. It's just crazy how much you can share what you know. Talk about what you love to anyone you can, even if you're standing in the grocery store line, or someday when we get back on the plane, talk about it there, because I think that shows, and you just never know who's listening. Write down your goals and just take this opportunity to add to your story, because small steps help build a great resume. And then all of a sudden you end up lucky. Participate in your local chapter. That was something that was important to me, was getting out to the local chapter meetings, coming to the FL-ASLA conferences. That's important too. You know, get to know everybody there, because that'll come back to you. And you know, when you're reaching out and sending emails, my biggest advice would be just make sure they're relevant to that agency and grammatically correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Shiva?
Hi, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, I had about 6 years experience before I lost my job in November 2008. So because of those 6 years, I really had experience from concept to construction. It actually took me about 1.5 years to land my next job. So in that 1.5 years, I started a business and started freelancing, working with local contractors on high-end homes, doing pool design and other home-related design. And then I also prepared for the LARE. The job that I got in July of 2010 was with the city of Castleberry as their urban forester. Again, that was not exactly a position, just like Anna was saying, that I envisioned having, but I ended up seeing the internal workings of a local government, worked with the Public Works Department, the Parks and Recreation Department, helped with events planning, did their, coordinated their GIS inventory of all of their public infrastructure trees. It was such a wide variety of experiences. Was out in the field with the irrigation crew, planting in the roadways, etc. So it was just a really valuable experience. And that was actually a temporary position that was provided through a stimulus grant that the federal government provided to local agencies. So I knew that was temporary, but it was still really valuable experience, and it ended up helping me land my next job, which was with the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority. And I did aviation planning for some time, worked on the main Orlando airport campus, just did a wide variety of things, in the airfield, on hangars, understood the operations of the airport, and actually used all my skills in GIS, CAD, planning. There's just so much interface with what you learn in school. And so I just gained a ton of experience and knowledge in overall infrastructure, transportation planning, et cetera. So it wasn't really something that I would have initially searched for, but of course, as I was looking for jobs and trying to match up with my skill set, this was a position in the local market in Orlando that I was qualified for. And I definitely don't regret taking that position. And I actually now work for a multidisciplinary firm that has an aviation, sector to it. And, even recently within this year, interfaced on, and in a public project with that. And then after that position, I moved on to more traditional landscape architecture positions throughout Central Florida. And what happened over the last decade or so has been that I worked for a variety of firms, and that really broadened my project experience. So I've worked on projects of every scale and every market, whether it's hospital campuses or themed entertainment or hospitality or public work with parks and trails and roadway infrastructure. If you name it, I've had experience with that. And just the losing my job and trying to just find where I could interface with my skills in the local market, it just gave me a confidence that I knew that regardless of the context of the professional setting, that I could bring something valuable to the table.
Thank you. All right, Jennifer.
Okay, so like several on the call, I graduated in 2009 with my BLA. I went back home to Virginia, where I'm from, and it took about a year and a half or so to get my foot in the door and get a job. During that time, I worked odd and end jobs just to, you know, make some money and keep myself busy. But during that time, I think I sent out over 100 resumes, maybe heard back on 15%, 20% of them. It's just a tough time, but, you know, I really went out and networked. You know, being in Virginia, I went up to Baltimore, I went up to Washington, D.C., and I was able to, you know, get office tours from people, have lunch with principals at firms, even knowing that they weren't hiring at the time, just to make those connections. I also became really involved with my the Virginia ASLA chapter and actually participated in a retreat with them. During that retreat, you know, I created a lot of great relationships, and ultimately one of those relationships put me in touch with one of their longtime friends at a local engineering firm, and she was the lead landscape architect there, and they took me in as an internship. And that internship in just a few months became a job, and I ended up getting my foot in the door and you know, working at a multidisciplinary firm, which was great experience, and ultimately landed me here in Florida 5 years later at another multidisciplinary firm where, you know, I didn't even apply to a job here. It was, you know, those connections I had made over those years since graduation, you know, opened up more opportunities for me down the road. So there's a lot of, I would say, to be persistent and patient, and to, you know, always stay positive and to keep making those connections and putting yourself out there. And that's what I learned during this time. And, you know, here we all are.
Thanks, Jennifer. So kind of staying on a similar topic about that experience during the recession and during the tough times, and I'll maybe start back with Cody. What did you do to keep your skills and to stay relevant? You know, what were, and all of these, I should say too, a lot of these questions were submitted by students. So, you know, what sort of skills do you feel like the students should focus on if they're unable to get a position right away?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that there was a bit of a kind of a joke going on with my friends and colleagues that had gotten laid off when I was getting hired on, and it was pretty interesting. You know, when I was young and in the profession, I definitely looked at it as, you know, I'm younger, I'm maybe more cost effective on a project. The whole cheap labor comment, you know, kind of really set itself in my mind. What's interesting is it's interesting to hear everybody's background and actually hear everything that we've gone through and where we are now, from being, you know, with all the vast amount of backgrounds and experience to being in really nice, great leadership roles in which we are now. Being on the other side of it now, I can very clearly see at the time why I wasn't laid off. You know, I think because I did work really hard at that time to really diversify my skills. Coming out of school, really focused on trying to pick up as much knowledge as I could, trying to diversify my skill set as much as possible, and then really just being efficient and passionate. Being on the other side of it now, when we're talking about a slowdown and, you know, being a part of a leadership team and having to make really challenging and critical decisions, it's kind of like you start to understand what you really look for in people. And for me personally, it's like a certain level of passion, but then this idea of like the craft for the profession. And I think everybody kind of described their own experiences, and looking back now as well, sometimes I reminisce about the old days when it was a little bit slower at times, and the ability to be a little more slower in your pace of working and allowing yourself to focus. And I look back and I think that provided so many great opportunities for me to really focus on the craft of the profession, really research what the profession was about, research what other opportunities were out there, what other firms were doing, what other countries are doing in terms of landscape architecture and how they're pushing boundaries. And having that as a young leadership opportunity to then bring those ideas to the table, whether it's in a design review in your firm, or whether, or if you're not even with the firm at the moment, really trying to bring those skill sets into your repertoire, and really starting to really craft your position as a landscape architect. So that's what I remember back then. I remember thinking, what kind of landscape architect do I want to be in 10 to 15 years? And I think that really helped me at the time because I did tons of research. I learned as many computer programs as I could, focused on design, kind of evolution, design capabilities and skill sets. And then through the ability of working with Gliding Jackson at the time and then transitioning into AECOM, as many others describe here, working on different types of projects all over the world, brought all my skill sets together. So kind of like I think about, where there is pause, there's great opportunity. And I look back, and now when I find opportunities for pause, it may be a quiet morning or a late evening, that's when I can really focus back on that skill set and still refining that today. But back then, allowing myself to do that is really important. So maybe the out of that is take this as an opportunity, really stay positive about it, and seek out as many professional alliances as you can, any opportunities that you can to learn and really craft those skills and develop that passion for the field.
I'll go to Shiva. Do you have anything to add as far as, what skills and, what you do to stay productive and to stay relevant in the field?
Yeah, I echo what Cody just said. And before I even get into specific skills, I think, one thing you have to understand is that you're building a career, you're not looking for a job. So one, primarily you are trying to build relationships. And as Casey mentioned, it's like whether you're in front of a decision maker or a colleague or wherever you are in the community, you're building relationships, and that's how you build a career and not just look for a job. And then the second point is really we are communicators, and there's at least three primary ways that we communicate. We're communicating our ideas graphically, verbally, through speech, and through writing. And so you should be working on your skills and communicating your ideas effectively. And now with the technology that we have, and it's just going to keep getting better and easier to communicate your graphic ideas, your verbal skills, and your writing. So think outside the box. Yeah, everybody asks when you're writing up your resume, your Adobe software skills and your CAD and your GIS and all of that you came out of school with. But there may be other things. I mean, if you're writing a blog, or you're doing interviews, or you're creating a website, or you're doing all of that, is just communicating ideas, and those are all skills that that may be outside the box, but it's really within the wheelhouse of landscape architects, and we're really holistic thinkers. And so the more that you can take from other professions or venues or whatever, and synergize that with our profession, I mean, I think you just become a more valuable person that you can work within multiple contexts.
Thanks. Gavin?
I think, the one common thread between a lot of really talented landscape architects that I've met is the ability to draw, and to be able to draw while you're thinking in front of other people, and be able to use other media. So quarantine or not, you can draw, sketch, get outside, that's a must, honestly, to be successful in this profession. Regarding the staying relevant, I was coming out of school. I was fortunate to be associated with the Landscape Architecture Foundation's Olmsted Scholar Program, and I got to go up to the national conference in Chicago that year, and I sat in on a CEO roundtable And I remember Lucinda Sanders of Olin saying, she got asked the question, what should entry-level, students do during this time to stay relevant or just get a job or whatever? And she flat out said, try to get a job at a place like McDonald's and maybe volunteer at a garden center. From that comment, I actually applied to Lowe's and got a job at their garden center. And when I had my interview with Mike Gilkey down in Sarasota, he really didn't want to talk about anything else, but he was impressed that I worked at Lowe's. So I may have gotten my first job because I worked at Lowe's Garden Center.
All right. So we've got a question. Adam, you want to ask the question? We've got a question that came in on the chat.
Yeah, we had a great question from Anthony, and I think it fits within this this context that we're talking about now. And Robert, we're going to come back to your question in a little bit later. What advice or encouragement would you give for networking in a social distancing world where gatherings and or individual meetings are not occurring? Anna, you want to take a first stab at that?
Let me unmute here, sure. I think just stay active in contacting people, and even through like this medium, going through video chats, just stay engaged with whomever you're talking to, and ask a lot of questions. I think, you all definitely, your generation is much more savvy with all the social media. So any kind of making connections that way and networking that way, staying in touch with your local chapters of landscape architecture or any other allied professions, I think is a good way to meet people. And I think just keep at it, keep at making contacts, and set up any kind of video conferencing or phone calls that you can.
Great. Any other panelists want to take a stab at that one? Jen?
Can I have them? I think too, a good one is, you see us all here, and you might know some other people through some organizations as professionals, and I know myself personally, I'm happy to look at a resume or a portfolio and provide comment. So that's really good to, reach out to some people who are in the field if you're just coming out of school, and, take advantage of us and get our opinion. Early on. And then also, in the professional environment, we use LinkedIn a lot. So, creating a strong profile there, following some of our firms, friending some of us, following the ASLA chapters, job postings and things do pop up there. And it's also another way to communicate easily to people in your community.
Can I add one thing? Yeah, just adding on to the LinkedIn, and my experience throughout my career, LinkedIn has been very invaluable. So I've done a lot of networking that way and been able to message people that way and make connections through people in LinkedIn. And that actually has led to a couple of jobs throughout my career. So I would definitely encourage, I think that's a great bit of advice.
Okay, so we'll go on to another question. Oh, Gavin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Gavin.
All I was going to say is, we can't forget that we're human beings through all of this. We're behind computer screens and all that kind of stuff. So something that has always impacted me, and I know whenever I've had the opportunity to do it, it's impacted others, is send somebody a handwritten note. It sounds so old school, but it will stand out if you do something like that.
A good one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll go back to the list of questions that were submitted. Looking back, how did your experience impact your career as a professional, and maybe change your perspective from when you started or when you were in school? Let's see. Does anybody? Hey, Casey, why don't we send that one your way?
When I actually first started school, I was interested in golf course design. And then that just totally, the more projects I did, that just kind of fell by the wayside, and I didn't totally lose interest in it, but became more interested in just public and park projects. And so then that in turn shaped my projects then in the last 2 years. And that definitely led me down a road of working for a public agency.
Okay.
And
So
I
kind of
wanted
looking
to
at,
say too that, you know, in terms of, I think there's a little bit, just a brief discussion on the difference of working for public and private and economic times. You know, there's benefits to both. When times are great and, you know, construction is moving and real estate is booming, you're making big money out there, you know, and public, maybe not so much. But there's also pension and job security and other things, and the flexibility of having a family and not having to take calls at 9 o'clock at night and work on jobs till midnight. Not that that doesn't occasionally happen, but for the most part, not. It's just a different route to take professionally.
okay. So the next one, I'm going to ask Jennifer. So during the time, you know, some people asked about the possibility of going back to school and looking at maybe a master's degree. Maybe can you share your thoughts on your experience of going back to school and after your bachelor's?
Sure. So, like I said, I graduated in 2009 with my BLA, and I think like a lot of you guys, it's a 5-year program, and a lot of the master's programs are very similar. So I didn't want to go back to school and get my master's in landscape architecture. I actually didn't apply for grad school until after a year of looking for a job, because really the BLA really gets you in the door if it's from a good school and an accredited program. However, you know, looking at the job market and things and how people were hiring, getting something in an allied field seemed to be more relevant than the MLA. And so I got my master's in natural resources. So I studied a lot more law and policy and things, which in my mind at the time would open up opportunity for a lot more like government jobs, you know, like EPA, National Park Service. You start at a higher tier. So there was some strategy when I was looking at a master's program. I also really wanted to work and be a landscape architect. So I did my master's online through Virginia Tech. That way it gave me the opportunity when a job popped up that I could still take the job, and then at night I actually finished my master's. Of course, like everything, and I think Casey mentioned this too, when you really put yourself out there and start doing things, all of a sudden the balls start rolling. And after starting grad school, I think it was like 3 months later that I got my internship. So I would say, you know, education to me is really important. If you have that BLA, as someone who looks at resumes and things, you've got the experience and the education. A master's would be really good in an allied field, kind of like Shiva. She went into and on it like more like some planning and other, you know, avenues down the road.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we're going to ask, I think, one more question, just talking about everybody's experience, and then we're going to jump into talking a little bit more about looking for jobs and interviews. But we just wanted to ask, you know, what was the best and what was the worst advice you received during the recession? Kirsten, you want to?
Well, I think that the best advice, which I think everyone has pretty much echoed already, is, you know, not give up, stay positive. And to sort of touch on one of the questions asked before about how to stay relevant, I think that that was some of the advice that I received. And I remembered advice that I received back in my bachelor's. I come from an industrial design background, and I wasn't sure, oh, should I be doing interior design, like all these different design disciplines. And I remember an older student told me, you're a designer, and you're like, you're a designer, you can branch off into, there's so many different disciplines. And I tried to keep that in mind whenever I was looking for a job, just remember that you're really flexible, and, you can add on to your skills, maybe if you even have previous skills. And you know what, even if it's not completely related to landscape architecture, I bet you will still help develop your career and skill set in ways that you wouldn't know. And one thing, this is a little odd, but it's worth saying. Since I was commuting down to Miami, I had learned from a previous interview for an internship. Seemed like it was going really well. This is while I was in graduate school, but it was an internship in Miami, and they saw the address on my resume, and they saw that I lived, up in Palm Beach County, and they asked if that was going to be a problem, and I assured them it wasn't. I was commuting to school in Miami. I have family in Miami. Didn't have children at the time. I was saying I can even, sleep down in Miami every night. I have cousins, family. It's not a problem, but it seemed like they had a hard time getting over it, and I did not get the position. So one advice I'd like to let everyone know, I try not to tell too many details, because basically when I went for my second interview in Miami, I kept the fact that I had a newborn, and I kept where I lived a secret. I wasn't gonna lie, but if I wasn't asked, I wasn't gonna outrightly come out. I tend to be a little long-winded and an open book, and I was, don't let them know where you live, because it might be a deal breaker. And I got by in that firm for about a month before anyone knew. I basically figured, as long as I'm here and meeting all their expectations, why do they have to know? And it eventually came up because I got stuck in, traffic and was an hour later or something. But at that point, I think they sort of respected that I didn't, I wasn't asking for special, privileges due to it, and, didn't want to, take advantage of, oh, I have such a long drive, and, just tried to keep it to myself. So I think it got seen as I was, willing to do whatever it took. And so, you never know what they might hold against you, not personally, but, it's sometimes you can give too much information.
Great. All right. We've got a couple questions. One on, I think, under this topic we'll cover now is from Angelina. Many universities require a certain amount of internship hours to receive credit towards their degree. If you don't fulfill the requirement, as we all know, you can't receive your degree. So what options are there for students who aren't able to finish their internship credits before they graduate due to the current pandemic, along with navigating through the recession? Jen, I know you were back in school during the recession. I'm not sure if there are any of the other panelists were experienced that. Did you have any unique options while you were in school for internships?
Well, my school, I did more online during it, but I will say in 2008, so the recession was kind of starting between 2008 2009. And I actually got a job with the internship with the Fairfax County Park Authority. And I worked in their children's garden and did maintenance and taught academic courses that related to landscape and tied to curriculum. So it wasn't something that was specifically landscape architecture based or at a design firm, but I still, got myself into that environment. And I did trail walks with the kids, but my school still counted it as my required internship for the summer. And so there's different, I would say, just look outside the box. During these times, I also worked for the botanical garden at my university doing maintenance. I was on like a commercial lawnmower. I learned to drive a skid steer, a tractor. I was laying mulch. the geese would eat the plants and come back and plant them. So like it was some of the hardest work I've ever done. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you know, now in the office, I really appreciate those guys in the field and what they do every day. And, you know, I got to learn a little bit more on just construction and, you know, planting design too.
Any other panelists have experience with that? I'm not a panelist. I don't want to steal the show, but Angelina, just will let you know that University of Florida, I was in school during the recession. I went back to school later in life. So they did allow unique opportunities from, if you're golf course maintenance to, you know, Lowe's Garden Center. They were being very, very, very flexible and understanding of the issues that the students were facing. And they also allowed us to team up with other universities that were doing study abroad programs. So half of my class teamed up with University of Washington and went to Croatia and did the study abroad program, and that met their internship program. So the schools will be willing, and they're understanding, hopefully for you all as well.
All right, I'll open this one up to the panel. You know, if you're able to get an interview with a lot of interviews that are occurring virtually, what are some recommendations for interviewing well through a remote platform? Shiva, maybe?
Yes. So I think the big picture is you have about 7 seconds to make your first impression. So, and that's in, you know, any case, even if you're designing, you know, you think about, you know, the approach to your project, right? So it's the same thing when you're interviewing. So one, be on time, you know, or early. Take it just like, you know, be prepared for it just like a in-person physical interview. So, you know, be dressed professionally, be prepared with your portfolio digitally so that you can share, you know, on the screen. You know, if you have a video cam like this, you know, hopefully there's nothing in the background too distracting. So, you know, it's actually the digital interview or this digital interface is really part of today's business. So it's not, you shouldn't feel like it's, you know, a disadvantage to interview digitally.
Okay. What about Cody? What are your thoughts on interviewing through a digital format?
Yeah, I would provide a couple of levels of suggestion, and some of that is I've been seeing a lot of lectures that have been held online, and I've been on about 1 or 2 a week, just listening in and watching people speak, and it's amazing. I mean, there's just some things that you can do really well and some things that just don't go very well. One of them is becoming comfortable with the programs. And I remember probably a month ago, I was leading an interview process. We were actually interviewing architects for another project. And I was so nervous during the Zoom calls. So I didn't touch anything for like 6 straight hours because I was afraid something was going to burst into fire, something, internet was going to shut down. And so now I'm actually thinking about how fluid I am with the various programs that I use, but also just the ability to watch other people speak. If you look into the universities, look into different firms, there's a lot of firms that are doing things on Wednesdays, specifically kind of midweek, and watch people, learn their mannerisms, watch the way that they speak. We've had a couple of all-day design charrettes in the past few weeks that have been held via Zoom, and I've noticed we worked with a firm out of California that's called Red Propeller. And there was one gentleman that just ran point all day long. And I remember, I mean, even at my level now, how long have I been doing this? I was writing things down that he was doing well, and I was taking those things to note because I knew that I was going to be running point on another charrette or another workshop in the next couple of weeks. So as many as you can, I would get online, watch Zoom calls, watch lectures. There's going to be some that I watched a really great famous architect do one 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't very good. I was kind of disappointed coming out of it, but I learned just as much then that I know they have great design skills and talents, but their presence wasn't that great. So I will say, to Gavin's point earlier, you know, everything we're doing is building upon our career. And even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had tons of conference calls via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, GoToMeetings. And so to be able to sell ideas, talk through your designs, portray new ideas, and really be kind of on the flow as if you would be in the room, it's important no matter when the time, whether or not there's a pandemic among us or not. So watch as much as you can, take in as much as you can, and learn from the good and from the bad from what you see.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kirsten.
I'd like to just add, even all these programs that I have on hand for, you know, remote networking and meetings, it seems really simple, but I've even been guilty of it. Just make sure you're on there early, make sure everything works. And some of these programs, you do have to, you know, download stuff. So, you know, you get an invite, you should know what, you know, application is being used. Just make sure you download the stuff. And if you have the capabilities, you know, invite your friend, invite your mom to a meeting beforehand, you know, so that you can watch yourself talk and just be aware of your background and everything that Cody was mentioning. But, you know, it can slip your mind, and it doesn't mean everything will go perfect, you know, but it's, you know, maybe make sure there aren't other devices on your internet connection so there isn't a lag, just things that'll help with the way you're presented.
I want to ask just one, go ahead, Anna.
Just real quick, I was going to say anything you can do to minimize your distractions so that you can stay engaged with the person that you're interviewing with. So your phone, put it away, turn it off, or, you know, put it somewhere where you don't even see it flicker. And then knowing the programs, and also for your portfolio, keep it simple digitally so that you can share it simply. I've come across portfolios that are either internet-based or web-based. And then you have connection, the other person has connection problems seeing it or flipping through it. So it may be easier to have a simpler format like a PDF or something that's simpler to share that people have more access to seeing.
Sure, go ahead, Jennifer.
There you go. Just real quick, I know we've interviewed a couple people, and during these calls, I think also to remember to maintain posture and eye contact, just like you would be, you know, in person. That's really important. So just something to think about is, even though, you know, we're more web-based now, posture, eye contact, keeping your head up and not looking around in different places, it's noticed by others.
So just a quick follow-up on interviews. We received a couple of questions about firms, and so maybe if you guys have any suggestions of things that applicants should be asking firms, as far as you know, what are some things that they're doing to keep their firm moving during the recession? What are things that that they can look to, or even also what about firms or things that they can do in the meantime if a job was put on hold? How about Anna?
Sure. So a lot of things when the job says put on hold, or you're just looking for things to stay relevant. There's a lot of webinars out there. I've been doing a lot of CEU webinars, but that's certainly, even if you don't need continuing education credits for licensure, they're still worthwhile doing them. And so that you're continuing to learn, and you're also seeing who's out there, who's in your local area, developers, people in city government and parks and all that kind of stuff. So those are good opportunities. And also, yeah, what was the whole question?
Just, you know, what questions might they ask the firm? What sort of things should they be asking of how the firm is handling their response?
Yeah, I would ask about workload and kind of like the diversity of the work of the firm. So if they're more diverse, if they have a lot of public work, if they have private work, and kind of where their workload is and what they think they'll be doing in the future.
Gavin, go ahead.
If you got an interview, the firm has already looked at your stuff and is interested to get to that next step. So they're going to want to learn more about you as a person. And I would just, you know, I would research. One thing that can help is research the firm ahead of time and be engaged and be passionate about maybe the projects that they have ongoing or the type of work. That's kind of a not a good point if you're not really engaged or have done some research with that specific firm and what they do. So that would be my suggestion.
Can I add on to that? I think, Gavin, that's a great point. I've done a number of interviews, and every time somebody's ever asked a question of us, of the firm, I'm always floored. I love it. You know, when they're inquiring about the firm, whether it's about the workload, about the type of work that we do, why we do what we do, that's so rare. And so any opportunity that you have to prepare to go into it and then ask really thoughtful, meaningful questions that are real, you obviously have questions. You might just be afraid to ask them. But anytime that's ever happened, it's just outstanding.
I would just add to what Cody's saying. So, you know, whether you're looking for an internship or a full-time job or a part-time job, whatever it may be, I would say don't just look for job postings, but, you know, go out and find the types of firms that you want to work for or the types of context you want to work for, whether it's a, you know, a public setting or a private setting. And, you know, now especially, you don't even necessarily have to be in the geographic area to be able to support with work. And so, you know, I would definitely go, you know, proactively contact those firms regardless of a posting, and you know, see if there's any way that you can intern or work part-time or, you know, do freelance for them. You just kind of think outside the box and you know, go for places or firms or contexts that you would like to have a long-term relationship with.
Sure, go ahead, Gavin.
Just to add to Shiva's point is if being able to draw in front of people and be able to be confident in that is skill set number one. Number two is relationships. You know, and be able to, again, like Shiva had mentioned earlier, able to communicate, be engaging, be genuine. So you can make relationships and not actually be pursuing a job. So reach out to the firms, reach out to people, and you never know, maybe a year from then, you may, from that, you know, stepping out, you may get a job. You just remember it's relationships first. It's not just, you know, getting something from somebody.
Jen?
I want to follow up too. I mean, we are going through a pandemic and it's an unknown time for a lot of the firms as well. And a lot of us are also working at home, and hopefully soon we'll be transitioning back to our studios and offices. But don't be afraid to ask if you have an interview or you do make a phone call, you know, how the company is addressing the issue, their timeline is for, you know, bringing in interns. I know our company, we're a national firm. We have over 4,000 employees, and we have discussions, I know, pretty much every day, every week, you know, how we go about doing this. So again, don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of companies will be very transparent with you regarding this issue and understand that there's just a lot of unknowns right now, but it shouldn't deter you from making those connections.
I think that's a great segue, actually, to, I want to make sure I jump back to Robert's question that he asked at the very beginning. He said, I have a pre-existing medical condition and have been extra careful during this pandemic for my health and safety. With restrictions being lifted before medical professionals recommend, I'm very concerned that employers will have their teams go back to the office rather than continue working remotely. It's quite clear from the news that many people have politicized and are now hostile towards medical advice, and ruffling any feathers seems like a touchy subject with so few jobs and so many potential employees. How do you recommend navigating this sensitive issue in the interview and new hire process? Anyone first?
I can kind of follow up. So last week, my company actually put out a like a question base because there are people within the office who are employees that have underlying medical conditions that they also are apprehensive about coming back into the office, you know, too early before, you know, we figure things out on a global scale. But you know, one of the questions was, you know, would you feel more comfortable in the office coming in, you know, half the employees at one time and half the other so we can maintain social distancing? How would you feel if everyone wore a mask in the office? Do we stagger how people come into the office in the morning so not everyone's, you know, coming through the front doors at the same time? Do we not have meetings within the office? So I think, like I said, companies are very kind of cognizant, and we do have some people at my office that have underlying medical conditions, and, you know, you have to take care of yourself first. And so if you aren't comfortable with coming into the office, I think that's a personal decision too, and one that I think any respectable company would be very understanding of. And again, if you're interviewing somewhere or you're having a discussion, that's something that is a good question for an HR person. And I feel like during these times, people would be willing to really work with you. I wouldn't let it bring you down or deter you again from, you know, achieving any goals or opportunities out there.
And just to back what Jennifer was saying, you know, most of the firms that have federal contracts or any, you know, just larger contracts, they have to comply with CDC guidelines, et cetera, right? And that's how they manage their internal employees. So, you know, just be aware that it's not just an individual employee compliance or health issue, but especially larger firms, you know, have to provide documentation on how they're implementing their, you know, CDC compliance.
Yep. Okay. There was a question I want to go back to, and Cody, it's going to come to you because you discussed a lot of the meetings and things that you've been watching and whatnot. We had a question: where can we find these opportunities for talks and professional meetings?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I've been listening into are in our office. They get passed around quite a bit, and it's whether or not you choose to join in. A lot of them seem to be university-based, really trying to engage the students with the professionals. And one that I was on last week was the University of Virginia School of Architecture had listed it. So there's some that are listed via the various universities. So you may look into either your own university and what kind of program they can provide, or look into other universities because a lot of them are open. Sat in on one last week, and they're all very diverse. The one was an architecture-based firm specifically talking about their type of work. Another one that we sat in on last week was one that's held every single Wednesday, I believe. It's by Biohabitats, which is a group of engineers and landscape architects, and they talk about different. They're a water-focused firm in Texas that holds something every Wednesday, and I can't remember what they call it, but it's themed to the Wednesday. It's not Wind Down Wednesday. I know that it's something else, but there are tons of opportunities out there. Shiva had shared some webinars. I saw that question come in, and I was going to Google, you know, landscape architecture based webinars. I think there's tons of them if you Google them. So there's tons of opportunities. It's just really finding something that you enjoy listening to and watching. Those are the couple of examples that I've seen over the past couple of weeks that I've seen come up.
Yeah, and just to add, nonprofits are another one where I've seen webinars and pop up. So I think there is a lot of opportunity. Definitely, I've seen universities and firms, but any kind of nonprofit has had, just through continuing education credits or just lectures.
And go ahead.
Adam, can I just add to that? Other professional organizations, allied professions, just like ASLA would have webinars and things. The Association of Planners, APA, the Urban Land Institute will have things. Just think of these, national organizations. They'll have, presentations that you can watch. Also, I kind of just want to jump back to the question about further education, and I think that's a personal, pursuing the master's degree, et cetera. That's just a personal decision that has to be, you need to look at your finances and whether it's a good return on investment. But there are so many things, like getting your arborist certification, getting your lead certification, and a lot of those venues will have education or webinars and continuing education that is applicable to our field.
I was going to say too, a lot of our manufacturers, I know I attended or listened in on one yesterday by Hunter on irrigation, and they're really educational. So look towards some of the manufacturers on some webinars as well.
Gavin?
I would think outside the box a little bit, and maybe suggestions of places to look for just to learn is we don't really talk about business too much in landscape architecture, but at the end of the day, the further you go in your career, you're going to have to get involved in business or business development. So just maybe videos on business 101, go through and start to understand that. The second would be just construction materials and methods. There's tons of videos out there from, concrete, woodworking, go on down the line. But if you can start to understand that kind of stuff, it'll help you when you're doing detailing and construction documentation. So those would be two of my suggestions.
Excellent. We had a question that came in and actually matches. It's very similar to one that we had on our list. So I'm going to read it off of, I'm going to kind of combine the two. I'm very interested to hear your opinion. How do you think community design, landscape architecture, or urban planning could be improved for considering COVID-19? Do we need to adapt ourselves to think differently towards the community design with more attention to public health, social distance, urban design, or mental health? And similarly, the question that was sent to us is, do you think this market downturn created by the pandemic presents any opportunities for LAs, as there seems to be a shift in public interest towards valuable outdoor spaces? Who wants to take a first crack at that one?
I can kick off with that.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about this in our firm, and are actually working. We were fortunate enough through our federal grant loan recently to bring on some interns, and with our interns, they are doing some studies for the city of Orlando. It's pro bono work outside of our normal work, and it's actually focused on just that. It's kind of monitoring how people are using public spaces and how that might adapt the approaches we might take. What's interesting is I don't know that, at least from our firm, the way that we believe, the way that we work, it's not a radical shift. We as landscape architects, I think what we do is important for the health and well-being, both for people, but also the environments in which we live. What we're hopeful for actually is that it's a shift in the way in which our cities are planned. The role that a landscape architect serves on projects, the way in which we're brought to the table to make change within the communities and cities in which we live, kind of shining a highlight on that. And part of that is, I live in College Park in Orlando, and it's a traditionally designed neighborhood, lots of great little small park spaces, and what you see in some places of the world, what you see even here in Orlando, is we don't have enough park spaces. We don't have enough comfortable connections for people to make. And it's actually created some uncomfortable situations at times when we're out walking the dog around the neighborhood, and it's something we do on a pretty regular basis. But all of a sudden now everybody else is out enjoying the beautiful environment that we live in. And at least there's not very many cars, so we end up having to walk a lot of times down the center line of the street because there's so many people on the sidewalks, and trying to keep your distances at times is actually challenging, let alone in a park space. So what this shows us is, in the past, we probably haven't provided the infrastructure for people and for habitat that we need. And so I don't know that it necessarily evolves or changes the way a landscape architect practices, but I think it changes in the way in which we might be able to practice into the future in being involved on critical design decisions and being brought to the table. So that's a strong passion for us, but also an opportunity for us to use our voice in a positive manner moving forward.
Yeah.
So I think we're a little limited on time, so I want to make sure that we've got time to do a wrap up. And so what we want to do with our last few minutes is just go through the panel and just provide maybe some final thoughts and final words of encouragement. So we'll start with Kirsten.
I guess one thing I did want to touch on as I'm leading our municipal studio, a lot of municipalities are continuing, and it seems like a lot of the public work, there's work available. I'm incredibly busy, and I guess as others had said, I'm sure you can get my email from here. I'd be glad to review resumes, portfolios. Use this time to perfect your portfolio, and think, as Gavin was saying, if you're not the best at hand sketching, just get those skills down. And you might have a rendering that maybe didn't turn out perfect for your school project. Don't be afraid to go in and, everything's not perfect, make everything better, and hang in there, stay positive. We should be hiring. We were actively hiring, and everything was put on hold for a little bit, but I don't see that happening for much longer. So if you're interested, check out our website.
Thanks. Cody?
Yeah, I think saying that there's opportunities out there, stay positive, focus on that craft, as we kind of started all talking about all the different things that we've done, whether it's being in the field or doing something at home that really makes you more of an expert at one piece of what you might be doing in the future. But I think just positivity, I really do feel that there are opportunities out there. I'm hoping that this is a short-lived scenario that we're currently in, but it's also, I think, a scenario that will create new opportunities. So I really do feel in the next few months, there's going to be some things that open up, and there's going to be some really great opportunities for landscape architects who do some great things.
Shiva?
Just definitely work on yourself. I mean, college is not the end of your education. You should be pursuing your self-improvement and education for the rest of your life. And then as far as specifically with your portfolio also doesn't end, the last day of college. So, go do pro bono work, go, like Gavin said, go do someone's yard or whatever it is, add to your portfolio, and, take the time to effectively communicate graphically in your portfolio. And then yes, there's a time for a simple digital PDF or whatever it may be to communicate. But if you have other skills, modeling and animation and, audio, podcasts or whatever it may be, we're utilizing all of these communication devices with our clients. So if you can show those skill sets and it's not just compiled into one PDF, it may be an MP4 or some other thing, go for it, pursue those things and just keep improving yourself.
Anna?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what Cody was saying earlier with that last question. I think, landscape architects are perfectly positioned to think about green infrastructure and design. And I think what I've been thinking about lately, what might be interesting is how, if our new normal does include social distancing and the need, what does that do to our personal space? How does that grow? And likewise, how does that affect the scale of the space we're designing? So I think there's a lot of valuable insight that we as designers can bring to the table with all those kinds of questions. And what I would say is just stay positive, one foot in front of the other, keep going, have fun and stay curious about what your passions are. And it'll work itself out. And I think in 10 to 15 years, you'll be surprised where your career takes you. And I think that's the exciting part about thinking about your career as a longer term and bigger picture.
Jen?
All right. So, I think I'd have to echo what everyone else said. It's really, we all kind of went through that studio environment. I think we're all more people, like being around people, collaborating, and during this environment that can be tough, but there's different ways to do that. And, that collaboration, create those relationships, get yourself out there, network, write letters, get yourself on LinkedIn. There's so many ways for you to kind of put yourself out there and, communicate and get your foot in the door to create those relationships that might not pan out immediately, but 6 months, 1 year, 5 years down the road, I think you'll be surprised, what, that first hello or, interaction will take you. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. And I know a lot of us are really willing to help you during this time. So I think Lori's going to give our emails out for some of us. And I know, like others, I'd be happy to help answer any additional questions or review resumes or get you in touch with some of the people that I've, added to my network along the years as well.
Thanks. Gavin?
Thanks, Lori. I just want to say landscape architecture is an awesome profession. It's very rewarding. Just be passionate, be flexible, and just all the things that we've been talking about are, tools that you can add to your toolbox. When I was a kid, I watched this show called Old Yankee Workshop with my dad, and you guys may not know what it is, but I used to get frustrated because the guy had every single tool, and it was easy because he had all the tools. So the more you can build your toolbox, the better you're going to be in it. And like Shiva said, it's a career. It's not just one job. It's everything you do is holistically adds to who you are as a professional.
Thanks. And Casey?
Yeah, I would just say be confident, be humble. Like so many have said, hustle. We all hustled, and I think every one of us was telling in our stories the talk of that word and the importance of it. And we all came out of it, and here we are in various capacities being landscape architects, and we stuck with it, and you need to do the same.
All right, thank you. Was that everybody on the panel? I think I got everybody. We also wanted to just see if Ibru's with Florida International University, if she had any thoughts. I know probably a lot of your students are on the call.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you so much for putting this together. I am at home, sorry, can you? Thank you so much for putting this together. Our students are on the call, and also our officers for Florida International University SLI chapter. I also graduated from my first degree, architecture degree, during recession, and I feel that this is a really great service that you're doing to our students. And I have a couple of comments. I thought that's really important for you to capitalize on the skills that differentiate you from others. I have in contact with a lot of different firms, and they said some of them really need writers. Some of them need good drafters. Some of them need good presenters. So you really wanted to make sure that from your portfolio that reads out that this great skill, that you just put it out there and highlight. It doesn't have to have all the drawings, beautiful drawings, and nothing else. You really wanted to highlight these skills that differentiate you from others. Also, I recommend that don't look at any job as a temporary job. Even if you find some sort of an unpaid internship position and you think that it's gonna be temporary, do your job really well. Our LA community is so small. We all know one another, even national level. Everybody knows one another. So what type of effort you put in your job or internship is going to be coming back and helping you and linking you to one another job. Keep in touch with your professors. They may know some firms that they are hiring, so just check every once in a while. Apply for PhDs and consider teaching as a career. A lot of universities, because some people who couldn't find jobs, they wanted to continue their career. They wanted to go for a PhD they wanted to come back for second degrees, right? So the enrollments are going up. The schools are going to be looking for more professors to teach. So maybe you would like to take on that. And also lastly, ASLA membership is free. Now you're still a student. You didn't graduate yet. So please, if you are not an ASLA member, go ahead and become an ASLA member. Thank you.
Sorry. I thank you for that, Abru. You actually was one of the things I wanted to mention was that the Board of Trustees and ASLA National just did, if you haven't heard, passed the vote for all student memberships to be free. So that's a great way to stay notified of all the great resources that ASLA has, including this, and all the other chapters and nationals are doing meetings and webinars constantly. So that's a great way to keep in touch. Great way to network, stay involved. If you want to help out the Florida chapter, we'll be sure to take the help. So reach out to myself or anybody else. You can go to our website and find all of the executive committee members there, and just say thank you. Again, to everyone. I want to say thank you to the panels. Thank you again to Lori and everyone that attended this today. Lori, did you have any closing thoughts? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Sure. And I know before everybody leaves, we want to do a big screen capture of everybody, but I guess kind of what I would like to say is just thank you, first of all, to the panel. I appreciate it. And thank you for everybody that came. My hope in this is that as students that you can see that, here's a group of people and also know that this is just a small group of a much bigger group out there of people who have faced challenges in their careers, who came out on the other side different but better and have become successful. And so I hope that you're encouraged by this time and that you just remember that, your journey might not be exactly what you thought it might be, but that doesn't mean that you're not on the right journey and that you won't find your place in this profession. So I just would encourage you to stay engaged in the profession, stay engaged through ASLA, stay positive, and just look for opportunities to do good things during this time. We're all experiencing it, and so also look at it from the terms of those companies that you're applying for. They're going through tough things too, and they're having to learn new things and try new things. So there's enough room for sympathy and empathy for all of us. So anyways, just stay positive, be encouraged, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
And with that, I hope you're ready for your close-up. If everybody wants to turn on their webcam, we're going to end on a fun note, and we're going to do some screenshots. And so I've got 49 on my page, so I've got 2 pages worth here. So once we fill up one, I'll take a screenshot and then go to page 2.
And also, if you guys would, in the chat feature, we'd love to hear your name, where you're from, what college you go to. So maybe before you leave, if you'll just write your name, where you're from, what college, what year you're going to graduate, it'd just be great to hear kind of a sample. And also we're going to repost the contact information for the panel. So please feel free to reach out, and again, thank you.
Let's see, we got some more coming on. I'm going to wait. We need some more. Let's see. We got Dean, Allison. Oh, we got David.
This is a judgment-free zone. It's okay if your hair's not done. It's okay.
Yeah. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Come on, don't be shy. See a few more before I get a full page here. I've got 49 on my screen, so I'm waiting for it to fill up. Just a few more. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot. Smile for the camera. Wait, I guess I should smile too, huh? All right. Let's see. Make sure I got a good one. All right. I think Corey was taking some too, so excellent. With that, Lori, you want to send us off?
That's it. Just a big thank you to everybody. And also, we did mention we're recording this, so we're actually going to post this both on the Florida Chapter's website and then also ASLE National's website. So if you have friends or classmates that weren't able to make it today, please share this. Share it with any of your classmates or colleagues or whoever, and we'd love to get the word out. But thank you guys. Thank you for your time, and God bless everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.